Okay, I'm going to take you through this warm up number 2. I gave you a previous warm up. I have a video on warm up number 1. This right here is going to have us practice. We'll start off practicing finding the inverse of a function. So on your test, expect it to be linear. We have a linear function here. To find its inverse, we switch the roles of x and y. F of x is y. It's now going to be an x. The x is a y. So now I'm going to solve for y. So it's going to take me 2 moves. I'm going to subtract the 10 because this plus 10 I don't want. I'm going to send it over to the other side with the x. And then my last move is to divide everything by 2. Okay, so I can clean this up. So especially if I had to graph this, I would want it so that I can see the slope and the y-intercept. So really x over 2 is a 1/2 x. So that line is going up 1 over 2. And then negative 10 over 2 is a 5, a minus 5. So there's the inverse, okay? And again, it's pretty easy to graph these. You should be able to graph them pretty quickly. So on your test, you graph the original function and then graph its inverse, okay? Once we have its inverse, I tell you to evaluate when x is 10. So I'm basically asking you to replace this x with a 10 and calculate. So hopefully you can do this in your head. Half of 10 is 5. 5 minus 5 is 0. Okay, so that's where we get our outcome of 0. Okay, this next one is quadratic. Doesn't matter. We're just going to find that its inverse is going to be a square root function. Okay, so I switch the roles of x and y, and I will solve for y. So I have to subtract the 1. And then to get y by itself, to undo squaring, we take the square root. So I take the square root of both sides. And then our inverse, so I'll use inverse notation, it's technically going to be plus or minus the square root of x minus 1. Okay? So then I ask you to then plug in a 10 for x. So you're going to end up taking 10 minus 1, which is going to be the square root of a 9. And I'm hoping that you realize the square root of 9 is a positive 3 and a negative 3. Okay. Number 3, we're going to see is a cubic function. So when we find its inverse, it's going to be a cube root function. Okay, so same process. I switch the y, make it an x. Where I see the x, I'm going to make a y. And I'm going to do inverse operations to get that y all by itself. So it's going to take me 3 moves. First move, get rid of the plus 2 by subtracting. So we can simply subtract 2. And now I'm left with the quantity y plus 6 cubed. I cannot subtract 6. You cannot get to the 6 until we get rid of the power. So it's being cubed, so I take the cube root. So to make this disappear, I take the cube root of both sides. That wipes out the power. We're left with the cube root of x minus 2 equals y plus 6. And then our last move is to subtract 6 and make sure it's on the outside. Okay? Can't be inside or underneath the radical. So it's the cube root. And remember, with cube roots, odd roots, you don't put plus or minus. So it's just the cube root of x minus 2 and then minus 6. And when I evaluate, I plug in a 10 for x, and then I have to calculate that expression. So 10 minus 2 is going to be 8. So the cube root of 8, we should know, is a 2. So 2 minus 6 is going to give us a negative 4. Okay? So again, that's just practice going through the process of finding the inverse of a function. Okay? Now, this problem right here is going to be very similar to what's on your test. So on your test, you're going to end up be given a linear function. So you're going to first graph this linear function, and I'm hoping after all the different types of graphs we did so far this year in Algebra 2, going back to a line is going to be such a breeze. So the rule is 1/5 x plus 1. That 1 tells me the line passes through the y-axis at 1. And then the slope is up 1 over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so there's 2 dots. There's my line. I'm also going to have a third point. I'm going to go down 1 and to the left 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That way I can draw a somewhat straight line. So there's my original function. I'm going to go through the process. I'm going to make this y and x, and I'm going to turn the x to a y, and I'm going to solve for y. It's going to take me 2 moves. So there's my first move by subtracting the 1. I have x minus 1 equals 1/5 y. And then you can divide by 1/5, but that would be real ugly. X minus 1 all over 1/5. Well, we learned dividing by 1/5 is really multiplying by 5. So I think it's easier to multiply by 5. And the inverse, so I'll use inverse notation, is going to be 5x minus 5. Okay? And just make some notes. This, my new inverse, and I'm going to use a pencil to graph the inverse. So I have this starting point at negative or 0, -5. Notice this point was -5, 0. If I switch them, I get this dot right here. Okay, that's my starting point right there. And its slope is going to be up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 over 1. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 over 1. So my inverse is very steep. And here I have my inverse. And remember, this is your folding point. Okay, the dotted line y equals x is where these points would match up. Okay, that's what I need you to understand. That's what it's going to look like on your test. You're going to graph a linear function, and then you're going to graph its inverse. And the relationship between inverse functions, we take any dot that's on the 1 and then reverse it. So like this point right here is 5, 2. I'm going to have the point 2, 5, okay, on the inverse. So that's all we're doing when we are calculating and finding the inverse. Okay, so the other half, this will also be on the Chapter 5 test. I will give you 2 functions, and I'm going to ask you, are these inverses of each other? So you are going to go through the process of doing f of g of x and simplify. And if it comes out to an x, then we have to do g of f of x. And if that comes out, if they both come out to x's, then we can say, yes, they're inverses. If they're not x's, then we can say, no, they're not inverses of each other. So let's start with this rule. My f rule says take 2 times something minus 6. Okay, so we start with the f function, and now I'm substituting in the g of x function. I'm just simply replacing the x with a 1/2 x plus 3. And we're just going to simplify this. So we're going to have to distribute the 2. 2 times 1/2 is just an x. And then 2 times 3 is 6. But then I'm subtracting a 6. Hey, it comes out to x. Okay? So that's good. These could be inverses of each other. We have to then check g. So I take my g rule, which is 1/2 times something plus 3. And I'm going to substitute in my f of x rule. Okay? So again, just keep yourself organized. And then once I clean this up, you're going to see that half of 2 is just a 1, so it's 1x. Half of -6 is -3. And I end up proving that it's an x. I show the steps that both resulted in an x. So then I can say, yes, we have inverse functions. I verified they are inverses of each other. Okay? This last problem, we do the same thing. I'm going to take my f rule, which is 3 times something plus 12, and I'm going to replace it with 1/3 x minus 1. Okay, we'll clean this up and see what happens. Okay, so 3 times 1/3 is just a 1, so we're left with 1x. But notice we're going to have a -3 plus 12, So this comes out to x plus 9, which tells me these are not going to be inverse functions of each other. So the fact that I got an x plus 9, I can answer this question right away. I can say no because this was not an x, but I still want you to find g of f of x then. So for g of f of x, I take my g rule and I plug in, I substitute the x. So this x gets replaced with a 3x plus 12. Okay, and I'm just going to clean up. So simplify means get rid of parentheses, combine like terms, and see what we're left with. So 1/3 times 3 is just an x. 1/3 times 12 is just going to be a 4. And I'm going to end up with x plus 3, which again is not an x. So since it wasn't an x, they're not inverses of each other. Okay, so that's exactly what you can expect on your test. Okay, you're going to either get the fact that they will be inverses, where they will simplify to give you x's, or it's going to be something else. Okay, so make sure you understand that. Okay, so thank you for watching. That took a little over 11 minutes to complete that warm up, but hopefully you're learning and you're getting yourself ready to take this test. Thank you for watching.